Welcome back, everyone, to the Don Lemon Show. I am so happy to be joined today by someone I consider a friend. That's Dr. Cornel West. You see him there on your screen. He is a philosopher, he's a professor, he's a political activist, he's a current independent presidential candidate in the upcoming 2024 election. For decades, he has been among the most outspoken left-wing voices in American politics. Dr. West, thank you for joining me, my brother. How are you?
My brother, it's always a blessing to see you. You're bringing that rich legacy of Louisiana public sphere. It's a beautiful thing.
I had been wanting to get you on for so long. I missed speaking to you on the other network I was on, but here we are, and I'm so glad that you're here with me. I want to start with the upcoming election. As you know, 5 months away and counting. You're currently
Yeah,
on the ballot. Let's see, four states. You're in Oregon, you're in Colorado, you're in South Carolina, and Alaska, along with the pending ballot positions in Utah and North Carolina.
well, we got Vermont.
Okay. Oh, there's Vermont as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
indeed, and and North Carolina. We got Carolina and North
Okay.
Carolina.
So my question is, what is it? I don't know if you
So
feel
we are
that is
on
this
the
good,
move.
or do
We
you feel
got
like
seven
it's been
states
difficult
now,
getting on
double
your
double
name on the
that by
ballot in
midsummer.
the battleground states?
Oh yeah, it's a struggle. Oh, absolutely. You know, the corporate duopoly makes it so very difficult for third parties or independent candidates to gain access. But we have gone from 0 to 7 in a matter of months, though, brother.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
much so.
How many ballots do you expect to be able to get on in time for the election, Doctor?
Well, we're shooting for 50, and there's three. I mean, California and Texas and New York are very, very difficult, but I think we might be able to pull them off, but we shall see. But we're shooting
Hmm.
for 50, though, man. We're shooting for 50. We really are.
Yeah. Doctor, why did you go from the Green Party to independent?
Well, independent allows me to speak my voice in a much more robust way. The Green Party has its own internal dynamics. You're supposed to have four debates internal on the one hand. On the other hand, it has a history, as you know, of focusing on crucial ecological issues, and that's
Hmm.
very important. There's no doubt about that. But my independent candidacy is really is one that's much more tied to the relation of white supremacy to predatory capitalism and its connection to imperial tentacles. Now, the Green Party has various positions on that, but the Green Party has never made the struggle against white supremacy a central issue and never been able to make that connection to predatory capitalist processes in a way which I would like. Also, I have a spiritual dimension. As you know, I'm a revolutionary Christian as well. And it's hard in left wing politics these days to be free enough that you can connect the legacy of a Martin King to the legacy of Edward Said and Noam Chomsky and so forth. So I'm just freer. That's all.
So, Freya, you don't think that it stopped your momentum by switching from the Green Party to an
No, I don't. I
independent?
don't. No, not at all. Not at all. I
No.
mean, the Green Party had 48 states in the last election. Now they got 17. I mean, that strikes me as decline, though, brother.
Yeah.
In the last
Yeah.
few months, they've got one. We've got
Yeah.
we've got seven. We're on the
Yeah.
ascending. So in that sense, it made it difficult, I think, in the eyes of some people. Well, wait a minute, he's shifting from one party to the next. But I didn't want to stay on the Green Party simply because of ballot access.
Yeah.
Because in the end, it's the integrity of your witness, not just the ballot access that you have. Because we are going to be able to get on the states, we just have to do it in a much more difficult way on our
And
own.
it inhibits you. You think the Green Party inhibits you. The independent, being an independent opens you up to more people and more of
Well,
a
in the
possibility,
end,
right?
you know, a party is in some ways a party.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And a party can become a plantation. You know that. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm an
just like
independent, so I'm not. I don't. I'm not on any. I'm not
absolutely,
a Republican or a
absolutely.
Democrat. So as you know, I am an independent thinker, and I vote on people not because of the R or the D behind their name. It's
That's
because
right.
of what they stand for. What do you have to? Speaking of what they stand for. What do you stand for? What do you have to offer that the major candidates don't have to? Well, I should say that major third party candidates don't have to offer. I mean, like Jill Stein and Robert Kennedy.
No, I think that when we decided to talk about our candidacy in terms of truth and justice and love, I think I got more truth than the other parties. I'm telling more truth in the Republican Party. It's not hard to do.
What do you
Telling
mean?
more truth in the Democratic Party. Not too hard to do. I'm telling more truth in the Green Party. I'm telling more truth in any of the other parties. What is truth? Well, part of it is the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. So it's the
Yeah.
scope of those who are suffering, the variety of different ways in which they are suffering, and then having the courage to cast a limelight on it and talk about it. It could be Gaza, it could be Sudan, it could be Congo, it could be Southside Chicago, it could be Baton Rouge, it could be L.A. That kind of truth, but to do it in such a way that it is tied to justice and love. Because as you know, I mean, political culture, in some ways, most of the culture these days is just so many, is tied to lies, revenge, and hatred. And so to speak the truth, painful truths, in a spirit of compassion, a spirit of love, tied to struggle for justice and be willing to pursue justice no matter what the consequences are.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
that's a, that's a different thing. And that means, for example, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, right? That that even among a lot of my leftist comrades, God bless them, they'll tell the truth about Gaza, as I will, insistently, intensely, right? But I'll tell the truth about Iran. I'll
Mm.
tell the truth about Russia. I'll tell the truth about China. I tell the truth about Uganda in terms of its treatment of precious gays and lesbian brothers and sisters. The truth is something that is jagged edge, right? It cuts in a variety of different ways. So I'm not on any plantation. People say, whoa, he's a solo. No, I'm a free black man telling the truth, seeking justice with a spirit of love,
Okay.
regardless of the consequences.
Doctor, there are a lot of voices out there, and you believe and all of those voices that are out there, they're not speaking the truth. That you believe that you're the only voice of truth,
No,
or
no, I would never say only. I'm just saying I'm willing to speak more of the truth. None of us are speaking the full
got it,
truth because truth is
got
capital T. You know what I mean? We all crack vessels, though, brother. The truth
it.
is crack is capital T. I'm talking about small truths, but I believe I'm speaking many more truths with a consistency than
Yeah.
any other candidate out there. Now, as I said before, when it comes to Trump, it doesn't take too much. When it comes with Biden, he's denying genocide, enabling genocide. Trump, bona fide gangster, we know that. He was lying 30,000 times in 4 year terms and so forth. But it's also true with the other candidate, RFK Jr. And is he speaking the truth about Palestinians when he says they're the most pampered people when it comes to international aid? No, he's lying.
Yeah, I've got to ask you though, because look, that's a whole nother subject to get into about that, because
Right.
this is a fight and a conversation that is not going to be settled within this
That's right.
interview. But I want to ask you about being a spoiler, because folks are saying, "Hey, Cornel West is just being a spoiler," because it shows that Robert Kennedy Jr. is pulling more people from Donald Trump, right? And you and Jill Stein are pulling more people from Joe Biden. And your chances of winning, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be in this, but
Right.
that
Right.
you're realistic about your chances of winning. But do you feel like you're going to be a spoiler and that you are helping to elect Donald Trump, who I know you don't agree with?
Well, no, I mean, he's dead up fascist. There's no doubt about that. But you got to keep in mind, my brother, that every politician has to make their case and earn people's votes. There's no entitlement here. There's no ownership of votes. Right? If people once voted for Biden and end up voting for Trump, was not a spoiler. People decided Trump. If people once decided for Biden and decided that he's got policies they no longer agree with and they go with me, I'm not a spoiler either. People are thinking for themselves and reaching their conclusions. You see, so that the idea that somehow people are spoilers because all we have are two candidates. And you see, if your assumption is there's no alternative whatsoever to the corporate duopoly, then anybody is. Libertarians, are they spoilers? No, they're making their case. And keep in mind, 40% of Americans don't vote at all.
Yeah.
Right? And you got 62% of Americans say they will never, ever, ever, ever vote for the two dominant parties. So that where does spoiling come in here? The whole discourse is spoiling.
But Dr. West,
Presupposes the two-party system.
we hear that every time from a third party candidate, and I guess Ross
Right,
Perot was the only one that came the closest. We hear that. Look, and I'm not trying to discourage you
right.
from running, but I'm just
Oh, no,
living.
no, I hear
We have
you.
to live in reality. We
Absolutely.
hear that every single time. That the third party candidate, they should be able to, and it just seems like a protest candidacy or protest vote that ends up giving the vote to the person that you would rather not have in office. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because I
Right,
know if
right.
the choice is, if you weren't in this, let me ask you this: if you weren't in this, would it be Biden or would it be Trump?
Oh, I would never vote for either one. How could I
You wouldn't
vote
vote
for
for
a
either one.
fascist
Okay.
and a genocide denier and genocide enabler? It's like asking the free Negroes in Philadelphia in the 1850s, you got a choice between a liberal slaveholder and a conservative slaveholder. Which one you going to with Johnson? Hey, I don't smoke. I don't vote for slaveholders. I'm gonna vote for the Liberty Party. That was the third party of that day, right? That's what Frederick
Hmm.
Douglass was working on. That's what this sister was working on. The one and only Harriet Tubman and others. Now, of course, they couldn't vote because of the white supremacy and the slaveocratic character of America at that time. But if they had to make choices orally, rhetorically, they're not
Hmm.
going for slaveholders, and that's the only
Right.
option.
Okay, so you're talking about you believe that Joe Biden, that is genocide. Okay, that he's a genocide supporter. Is that what you said? Saying
Enabler and deny. He
enabler.
denies it's
Okay.
a genocide. He enables it with the money, our taxpayers. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, okay. It's awful that people are dying, and not everyone agrees that it's a genocide. It's awful that people are dying. It is not also in America, and we are voting in America. I'm not saying that I don't care about the people in Gaza, so don't get me wrong. Don't come
Right,
for me,
right,
people. But this is
right.
happening in America. So do you believe, and this is not slavery times, right? I understand what your argument is, but do you really think that Joe Biden victory would be as bad or as detrimental to the country and to the world as a Donald Trump victory?
Well, the thing is that it's hard to compare a second civil war, which is what Trump is leading the country toward. That's how sick the country is at the moment. And a third world war. If you have a choice between the third world war, because it's not just Gaza and genocide. You got China, you got Russia, you got possible nuclear exchange, you got Putin, you got Xi. I mean, this is a global situation. And America, as an empire, as you know, 800 military units around the world, 130 special operations in countries around the world, is an empire. And I'm anti-imperialist. I don't believe that America ought to be an empire. Empire needs to be dismantled. We need to be a decent nation among nations in solidarity with poor and working people all around the world. That's the legacy of Martin King, Fannie Lou Hamer. That's my tradition,
So what are
right?
you saying then? Because my question was, do you really think a Joe Biden presidency would be more detrimental or as detrimental or more to the country than a Donald Trump presidency?
I think both of them would be so devastating. Both of them would be so catastrophic that it's hard to choose. That's what I'm telling you.
But you know you're only going to get one in the end. And chances are it's going to be one
Well,
of those two gentlemen.
you never
And,
know. Now I
and I
have been
use that
saying.
term gentleman loosely, but go
No,
on
I
for one of
understand
them.
because I would say gangster, but yes, but no, but I'm thoroughly convinced though, brother, that Trump is on his way to jail and Biden's going to do an LBJ and pull out. There's a good chance we may not have those two figures at all.
You really believe that?
Yes,
You think Joe Biden, you
absolutely.
think Trump is going to go to jail and that, but people are saying two things. They're saying they're going to vote for him even if he's in jail. He could end up becoming the president in jail. And the other thing is that you're saying you believe Joe Biden is what, going to relinquish his delegates at the convention, and someone else is going to run in his place? Is that what you're saying?
Given the escalating voices calling for him to drop out, given the situation of his precious son right now and the impact on the family, and given his reassessment of his chances of winning in light of all of the polls pulling the rug from under him. But put it this way, we are in real time, brother.
Hmm.
And it means we have to be open to a variety of different perspectives. And I don't have a static or stationary conception of the fact that we're going to be in November where we are now. Oh no,
Okay,
not at all. Never.
there's a lot of time between now and November. I will grant you
Absolutely,
that. But
absolutely.
if it's, who do you think it would be? Let's just take the Biden part, and then we'll get to Trump.
Right.
Who do you think it would be if it's not Joe Biden on the ticket? Is it Kamala Harris? Is it you? Is it
Oh
RFK?
no, I'm not getting
Is
on
it
no
Nikki Haley?
genocide
Well,
denied ticket.
you're an independent. I'm just saying
No, right.
who's going to rise
I
to
was
the,
thinking about
yeah.
just Democrats. I thought you were talking about just Democrats.
No,
Because see,
who rises?
it would be Sister Kamala, it'd be Brother Gavin. it would be Sister Gretchen. Those would be the
Hmm.
three main ones.
Okay.
That's the B team. Now, that's a weak B team. We won't go into all of that.
Well,
But
then you're
that's a
going to. What's
weak.
your odds against those folks? You think you would still run if it's Kamala Harris, if
Oh,
it's Gavin Newsom,
absolutely.
if it's
Absolutely. I think I
Gretchen
would
Whitmer?
actually be even more preferable than those folk because when you look at what they've done over the last number of years and you look at their capitulation, not just Wall Street, but the capitulation to U.S. foreign policy in Gaza, the refusal to call out and question this ugly, if you don't want to call it genocide, I think it is just crime against humanity, whatever it is. When you got 15,000 children killed in a matter of months, that's some pretty sick stuff going on.
Okay,
I
let
think,
me just again, living in reality, and I understand the situation is dire for if you're in Palestine and Gaza, and even for some Israelis. So it is, but as when it comes to Gaza, that is like ninth or 10th or 11th on people's concerns, below the economy, below a woman's right to choose, below inflation, and a number of other things. That falls way below. So people aren't really voting on what's happening in Gaza for the most part.
well, I think people are voting in part on well, some people are voting on people's character. If you are a president that denies genocide and enables genocide, then you're not a reliable president on a whole host of other issues. That's one of the reasons why Biden couldn't come through on the John Lewis Civil Rights Act a bill. He couldn't come through on George Floyd Jr. bill because it's clear as a politician he doesn't have a moral character enough to fight for things he deeply believes in. So that
Hmm.
there's a connection between seeing a genocide and denying it, calling a red line, and the red line is crossed and killing more and more Palestinians and denying it. That's a moral issue that connects
Hmm.
to a whole host of other issues.
Okay,
You see what
so
I mean? So
let's.
that in that
I
sense,
understand.
okay,
Go on.
okay.
In that
No, no,
sense,
no,
what?
no.
I'll let you finish.
No, you go right ahead, my brother.
Well, I just wanted to go. No, I wanted to move to Trump because I want to make sure that we get there. So you think that
Right.
Trump is going to be in jail and therefore will be disqualified from running for president
No, no,
because
he
there's no
won't be
rule that.
disqualified. No, no, he's not going to be
Okay.
disqualified. It's just going to have more and more impact on slices of his base. He's got
Uh-huh.
some loyalists that would vote for him if he was in Dante's Inferno, but he's got
So
some
he will
other
be the
ones.
nominee. You just think this weakens him considerably, where
Absolutely.
someone else could come in and actually make and appeal to the voters, whether it's an independent like you, hopefully, and
That's right.
has a better chance of winning. That's what you're
That's
saying.
exactly right. That's
Okay. All right. I
and
understand that.
my calling is to be consistent and constant in regard to truth. And it's hard to talk about truth in
Hmm.
politics these days because it
Hmm.
is the first casualty. But I'm tied to truth talking and justice for poor and working people, and that's hard too because it's hard to
Yeah.
find politicians who are honest about that and consistent about that.
But you don't think you can work with either of those folks? You don't think you can work with Biden or work with Trump on on what you're saying about poor people and working class people and so
Now,
on?
what do you mean by work with? You mean
Yeah, that you would have more of an opportunity, right? Because again, reality about winning. I mean,
right?
again, I don't want to discourage you. You know how
No, no,
the
I
hammers affects
understand.
you.
You're very
But I
kind.
mean, if it's that you would have a better chance of working with someone who will possibly, where it's 50-50 that they can become president. If Joe Biden becomes president, you don't think you'd have a better chance of working with him, and therefore during the election you support him, or the same thing for Donald Trump?
No, no. I think the reason
Okay.
here, though, brother, is that again, I'm not over against just an individual or a
Mhm.
presidential candidate. I'm
You don't
talking
like the
about a
parties.
system itself is organized
Got it.
on greed. It's a system
Hmm.
itself that manipulates the fear of gullible people. And when you're talking about justice, as you know, you're talking about something systemic. You talked about that in your wonderful book on race. You're talking about something that is systemic here, right? And so Biden is head of a system that moves in a direction that makes it almost impossible for the Democratic Party to speak to the needs of poor and working people, let alone the needs of not just Palestinians, but other
Hmm.
folks on the African continent and Haiti and Latin America and so forth. Look at the relation right
Okay.
now of the United States with El Salvador. You got
All right.
another gangster down there. Oh no, we sent our representative, and we're very supportive. Well, we got a long history of supporting right wing dictatorial figures and gangsters
Well,
in
I
Latin
mean,
America.
listen, look, Donald Trump is really, I mean, he's cozying up to Viktor Orban, which is
Oh,
really,
I mean,
really
Trump is
threatening.
just an explicit
Yeah.
fascist, and so
He's
you know
just, yeah.
we're not surprised when he's close to the fascists in Hungary and other places.
I think a lot of people share your apathy when you talked about. I want to get back to the apathy of people voting. You said it was 40 some percent of people never vote. 62% say that what it's. You said
They
it was
would never
something
vote
like
for the two parties,
for
right?
the two parts. Okay, so according to the a Marist poll, right, a national poll, non-white voters are more than twice as likely as white voters to pass on voting for president. Voters under the age of 45 are 3 times as likely as older voters to do the same. Where is this apathy coming from?
Because they believe that the whole system is so thoroughly corrupt. They believe that that corruption is encrusted and entrenched. It's like a poison, it's like a toxic, and therefore they just give up on politics. Politics becomes a form in the language of Saul Bellow, low comedy. You know that you know your expectations are low because the level of corruption is so high. And they've got, I mean, that kind of thoroughgoing cynicism is not completely irrational.
Hmm.
There's some deep insights about the depths of the corruption of the system. You know, you and I know the intimate relation between corporate America and the monopolies and the oligopolies and the politicians. We know the
Hmm.
relation between APEC and the politicians. We know the relation between NRA and politicians. We know that 70% of Americans want Medicare for all, but pharmaceutical companies don't. So we don't get it. So that's the thwarting of the will of majority of people, and people say, "Oh, politics is just corrupt. This is
Yeah.
legalized corruption and normalized bribery."
Is it politics or is it the system, as you say? Maybe the system needs to be overhauled, right? We
Well,
need an
politics
over.
is a part of the
Yeah.
system, but in the end,
Yeah.
it's about big money and big military, though, brother.
Well,
That's
I
the
don't
most
think people
powerful.
disagree with that. But let me ask you about this because
Exactly.
I know you listen what you do as a professor, and I know that you lived through, witnessed the civil rights movement. I mean, you're still a young man. You were there for part of it, right?
Well,
But
appreciate that. I had my birthday the day before yesterday at 71, so I'm very blessed.
ah,
Very
yes.
blessed, my brother.
So you were here, you saw a lot of it, you witnessed a lot of it. In recent polling, though, Donald Trump, and you said that another presidency by him frightens him. You said he's cozying up to dictators and such. But he has been gaining major ground with black Americans, particularly young black Americans. As someone who witnessed the civil rights movement, as your life's work in civil rights, why do you think he's making these gains?
Because people are hungry for an alternative to a
Even if that
corrupt.
alternative is him?
But that's the sad thing, you see, because if people are locked into a two-party mentality and they banked on the Democratic Party and they're hungry for an alternative and they're told there's no other alternatives to the Democratic Party other than the Republican Party. So that the
Hmm.
neo-fascist gangster benefits from the hunger and thirst for something other than the Democrats. And it makes it difficult for somebody like myself and those on the left thinking, no, we do have an alternative. And say, oh no, y'all are spoilers. Y'all don't have a chance of a snowball in hell. No, you're
Mm.
not. The only alternative is the either or. So Trump ends up, and of course, right now it's just the polling. We don't know exactly what will happen again in 5 months. But black folk have been catching so much hell, brother.
Yeah.
People talk about inflation, but we still have levels of underemployment. People talk about how well the jobs are doing. A lot of people got 2 jobs, still living in poverty. 2.5 jobs just to get out of poverty. So it's not just a matter of low unemployment that you get among the Democratic Party operatives. We know that the system is driven by grotesque wealth inequality. We
Hmm.
know that it is very 62% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck
Hmm.
with 3 individuals who have wealth equivalent to half of the population. The brother who you started your wonderful show on. I mean, he's one of the 3 who have wealth equivalent to 160 million people. That's worse than medieval Europe, man. in terms
Mm.
of grotesque wealth inequality. And they say, well, that's the way the system works. Well, no, it doesn't have to work that way. Well, he's so smart. They're so smart. They deserve it. No, no, there's a whole lot of smart folk who have broken the Ten Commandments financially. This is not just a matter of merit whatsoever. The system itself is created in such a way that its structures and institutions generate high levels of inequality that ought to be viewed as obscene.
And that you think that black people are the biggest, I shouldn't say beneficiary, but the recipient of the worst parts
The
of
worst,
that
well,
type of
in
policy
black folk and indigenous peoples, yes,
and
that's
indigenous
true. But
people.
of course,
Okay,
there's
so
many poor white brothers and sisters catching hell. Many
yeah,
working class folk of all
yeah,
colors
but they're all,
catching hell.
but not they're all, but I'm
But
generalizing here, but they are
but
supporting
disproportionate.
the person who is really not
Exactly.
helping them, which
That's
is they're
exactly
voting
right.
against
Because
their own interest.
they're hungry for an alternative, and the only alternative is the fascist who's tied to big money and big military and acts as if he's a populist. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a joke.
Yeah.
It's a
So for the
farce.
black American support for Donald Trump, you don't think it's a rejection of Joe Biden, you think it's something bigger than that?
Well,
A
it's
rejection of the
both a
system.
rejection, but it's a hunger for something different and
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
distinctive, and they don't know where to go. But it is
Let me
more
read some of
black brothers than it is the black sisters, though. You know that too. It is
yeah.
gendered, though. You know
Oh,
that.
it is. I mean, black women, it's like, 99 point, you know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
but look, I do have to say this, that black women are the most educated among the American populace. So say what you will. Take away from that what you will. All right, listen. Let's talk about about some things that affect what's happening with race and African Americans in this country. The Supreme Court's overturning of the affirmative action last year, for example, a Gallup survey found that amongst Black Americans, 56% of those 40 and older viewed the decision negatively. Right, 56% of those 40 and older viewed that decision negatively. 62% of younger adults viewed it as positively. Is there a generation divide amongst black Americans? Is it a political, is it a cultural divide, or both? Why do younger people see it as a good decision, older people see it as a bad decision?
You know, I just find it hard to believe that the young black brothers and sisters and siblings would view it as a positive thing. That maybe I'm just so locked into
Well,
the
it's
older
also,
generation.
but it's also the way it's worded as I look at this poll now, because it says 62% of older black Americans, right, viewed it
Uh-huh.
negatively, and older view it, right, and 62% of younger adults. So I'm not sure amongst black Americans, 55% of those 40
I
or
just,
older.
you know, it's hard to
Yeah,
believe some of
I
these
don't, I
polls.
don't know if I understand that poll. I don't know if I
Exactly.
understand that. Yeah,
I mean, I don't. I
yeah,
want to be open-minded as much as I can. It's just hard to believe. But there is a generational divide. Now, you know
yeah.
that. Look at the student campuses right now in regard to Gaza. Uh, you've got young black folk on fire fighting against genocide. How many black politicians? What's the Black Congressional Caucus doing? What
Hmm.
is Hakeem Jeffries doing? Speaker of the House. That's pretty high up in the hierarchy. You know what I mean? They can't
Hmm.
say a mumbling word about it. They can't even call it a genocide. They can't even call it a war crime. Is America violating international law and human rights? They can't even come out and say yes because
But maybe they
they're
maybe they
on
don't
the.
believe that. There are many
Well,
people who
no,
don't believe. There are many
they
African Americans who don't believe that it's a
well,
genocide.
I give you an example. I give you a good example to show how they own the plantation. Just a few months ago, they couldn't say the word ceasefire. How come? Because Biden hadn't said it yet. As soon as Biden said ceasefire, they start calling for ceasefire. Now that's echoes, brother. That's
Hmm.
echoes. The anthem of black people is not lift every echo. It's lift every voice.
Hmm.
Where's your voice? You got to think for yourself. They're following Biden. They're in the choir. They own the plantation. They don't have enough courage to speak and raise their voices. They imitate and they emulating the head of the plantation, who is, in this Democratic Party sense, is Biden. They couldn't say ceasefire at all. Even my dear brother Bernie. You know how much I love
Yeah.
Bernie. Bernie couldn't say ceasefire till the president said ceasefire. Hey, this is ridiculous. People can't think
So,
for themselves. You can't raise your voice for yourself when people are being killed and children are being murdered. Please.
I want to listen. I want to ask
Does
you.
that
I
does
want
that
to
make sense to you though, brother?
I understand what you're saying, but I still
Yeah,
think that some people genuinely don't believe that it is genocide, and some people genuinely think this is I'm analyzing here, okay? Not This is
right,
not
right.
necessarily my opinion.
That's right.
Um, genuinely believe that Israel has a right to defend itself, no matter how war is, and war is it's not precise, and you can't count apples for apples when it comes to or lives for lives when it comes to warfare and when it comes to defending yourself. And that it is unfair to say, well, 30,000 people have died on one side and then 1,000 people have died on the other. It's just not a fair comparison, and it's not actually a nuanced and an educated approach. That is the view of the other side.
But you can see how weak that actually is. Every nation has a right to defend themselves. There's no doubt about that. Very much so. Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. They're under occupation. They've been subjugated and dominated and so forth, right? But there's a difference between killing combatants as opposed to killing children and innocent men and innocent women. Those are war crimes. Those are crimes against humanity. And once you begin to cut off all of their support, cut off all of their hospitals, all of their universities, all of their infrastructure, it moves toward the crime of genocide, which is a third level of crime. Now, whether we call it
Well,
genocide or not, it's still a crime against humanity or a war crime, right? Now, once you reach
well, let
that
me
point,
ask you.
sure.
Do you think that history, that we're going to look back in history and it's going to show that it was an actual genocide and people are going to be ashamed of how it happened, or do you think it will be the other way? Because
That's a
I
beautiful,
always like to look at things through the lens of history. If you look at the
that's a
civil
beautiful
rights
point.
movement, if you look at George Wallace, and if you look at Senator Byrd, who changed their stances and they said, you know what, I was on the wrong side of history. Do you think that people are going to look back and say we were on the wrong side of history?
It's a beautiful question, though, brother, because we look at examples. When the young folk came out against Vietnam in the 60s, when Martin King came out against Vietnam in the 60s, and he went to what, 72% disapproval? 51% of black people, as you know, disapproved of Martin. Martin is just an extension of the communists. What he's saying is just extension of Radio Hanoi. Martin said what? I don't care. I'm taking a stand. I'm trying to be a decent human being. I'm trying to be a courageous, moral person. Now we look back, he's a hero. Now we look
Hmm.
back, the students are heroes. Now we look back, LBJ was wrong. LBJ himself at the end of his life. He kind of grew long hair like he's a member of Crosby, Still and Nash or something. You know what I mean? He was looking so cool at the end of his life, like he'd been hanging out in San Francisco or something. And he said, "Yeah, I was wrong. I was wrong." Hey,
Yeah.
well, why do we have to wait when the precious human beings in Vietnam or Gaza or Sudan or Congo or anything else are dying? That's the thing.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
you're right about the historical perspective.
Okay. Just for historical perspective, because when I'm looking at, look, I'm not sure I actually believe these polls, right, about
Right,
African Americans allegedly going over to Donald Trump.
right.
D- D- Donald Trump wins more than 20% of the black voters. That's what's believed. So they're not looking at him, if those numbers are right, in the same vein as a Dr. King or others, or
Oh,
Malcolm, who
Lord, no.
fought for,
Lord, no.
right?
That's
But
right.
because those, through the same sort of system that's criminalized African Americans, I just can't, I don't get it. So I don't understand what's going on and why they are, again, if it's true, why
Well,
is it
again,
appealing
you
to
see,
people
if
who
the
come from that
only
history?
alternative to Biden is Fox News, and Fox News is a very powerful disinformation machine of lies and mendacity, and that becomes the only alternative in your culture. You can see how decadent that is and decaying that is, but that's the only alternative in your culture. Then even black folk will get caught up in it because black folk are
Hmm.
American citizens like any other citizens, or they just pull out completely, as we saw before, and they say, "Hey, ain't got nothing to do with politics. It's
Okay,
nothing
so
but just."
you,
And,
you
and I'm
believe,
trying to just say, no, don't pull out. There are alternatives. There's still some folk trying to keep the flickering candle alive in a moment of overwhelming mendacity and barbarity. That's our moment. This is a moment of not just decline and decay, brother. Things are collapsing, though, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Collapsing, brother.
we're in an unusual moment. I mean, this is the first time we've had a
Absolutely.
former president of the United States and someone who wants to be president again is now a convicted felon,
That's
found
right.
guilty in the same courthouse as the Central Park Five that they were convicted in, a case in which Donald Trump took out a newspaper ad or newspaper ads in the aftermath of that crime, condemning
And
those people who
he,
were
he
exonerated, right?
he called for their deaths, man. That's the gangster like language back then. He called for their deaths. We had to march against him then.
So then how does a brother vote for him? That's what I want to know. Even
Well,
consider it.
I know. Well, let me tell you this, brother. When I was down in Charlottesville with some very, very sick white brothers who were neo Nazis in the Klan, right?
Hmm.
I saw a brother marching with them.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah, definitely. That when I was
Come
down
on.
in Charlottesville, brother. Well, two things. When I was down in Charlottesville with Brother Sekou and the others, they'll tell you there was a black brother with the U.S. flag marching with the Klan and marching with the neo Nazis. And when we walked through the park, these motherfuckers were listening to Motown, man. You say, hey, now this
Oh
is
my
only in
gosh, here
America.
we
This is
are.
only in America.
Oh my
And then, of
gosh.
course, you got David Duke, who's Catholic, and the Klan was always against Jews, Catholics, and especially blacks. He's
Well, you
Catholic.
know I know
He's
David
head.
Duke, right?
He's
I
head of
know
one of the
David
clans
Duke.
out of Louisiana. Now,
He was
hey,
when
now
I
you got
lived there, he
a
ran for
Catholic
governor, I
head of
believe.
the Klan. That's
Yeah.
upward mobility American style. Next thing you know, you're going to have black people and Jews in the Klan because things are so mixed up. The disinformation is everywhere. The
Well, let me
distortions are
It
everywhere.
is, and it's because of the disinformation. I think a lot of it has to do with social media and how people are getting their news, and that there's no editorial. You don't have to go through any editorial rigor to put something out on social media on these sites, and even in streaming on YouTube. You can have a
Right. That's
podcast or a
true.
streaming show and just state your opinion, and it's not necessarily right. There's no editorial process for people to get information out. Wait, real quickly before I ask you the next question, did you ask the brother, like, what are you doing?
Oh no, I couldn't get to him because he's
Okay,
mediated with all these cats that got guns and masks and the
all right,
ammunition in the guns, and we standing there singing "This Little Light of Mine, Let It Shine."
all
So,
right. I digress.
so
Were you surprised to see? Were you surprised to see Donald Trump convicted?
no, no,
Okay,
I wasn't. No, I
so
knew
you
the
already
evidence
said
would be overwhelming. So one of the first times in his life, he has some form of accountability. He's been able to say anything, do anything, and get away with it. Now he has some accountability, which makes him more upset, which makes him more full of revenge and so forth. But I was thoroughly convinced that they had enough evidence, no doubt about it.
before I let you go, I just want to ask you because you're saying that the folks in Washington couldn't say ceasefire until the president said ceasefire. Now he's saying ceasefire. So what happens next? What would you like to see happen on that front?
Well, I mean, Biden is calling for ceasefire, but still providing the monies and the ammunitions and the military equipment. He called for a red line. The red line is violated every day in Rafah, and he does nothing whatsoever. So it's clear that it's a bluff. It's wolf, 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 crying wolf, 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 and he doesn't mean it. He doesn't mean it. So what the sign that's sent to those who are on his plantation, who are following his every move and words is, oh, even when he calls for ceasefire, he doesn't really mean it. Even when he calls for red line, he doesn't really mean it. Why? Because his heart and his soul is not in ending the massacre, genocide, whatever you want to call it, is not in it. I think the main reason why Biden actually moved on this is because of the election. That says even less about him. You got all of these babies being killed, and you can't move until you're concerned about your election as opposed to having a moral concern about them being killed. His major moment of outrage was when? When the international workers were killed. It's not the Palestinian children. It's when the international workers were killed, he gets really upset. So that he doesn't believe a Palestinian life has the same value as an Israeli life or a European life or a white life. Well, see, I have no patience for that kind of that kind of racism, man. I have no
As a
patience whatsoever.
as a college professor, what do you think about the protests happening on college campuses? Some of them have gotten violent. There have been some destruction of property, but in general, how do you feel about it?
Well, it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's beautiful when human beings straighten their backs up and take a stand based on moral principle and are willing to deal with the consequences. Now, there's been ugly repression. We saw it in Colombia, and as you know, I've been blessed to be on a number of these college campuses. I just gave the Gifford lectures in Scotland. I was blessed to give those lectures there, and I was blessed to be able to speak to rallies there in Edinburgh. We had thousands and thousands of people. That's a beautiful thing, man. People are concerned about other people. There's compassion. It's care. It's absolutely. Does that mean that every voice that's in those rallies is a voice of rationality and compassion? Of course not. Human beings are human beings. But anytime people rise up and say, we will not stand for this kind of treatment of our fellow human beings, especially when they're being massacred, they're defenseless, they have no protection whatsoever, and the world is sitting and watching this. Of course, what else can we do but demonstrate or hit the street or go to jail or whatever? That's part of the best of the species, man.
Your first 100 days in office, what do you do, Dr. Professor Dr. Cornel West?
First thing I do, brother, I'm an abolitionist. I come up with ways of abolishing poverty, abolishing homelessness or unhousedness. Even when I win, I'm not going into the White House till everybody has a house. By example, I will ensure that poor people and working people are at the center of my vision. Wall Street, Silicon Valley, big tech, they will begin to tremble in their boots because I'm going after
The
their
first 100
organized greed.
days? In the
First
first
100
100
days.
days, though.
Now, of course, foreign policy, I end the funding so that there is no possibility for the genocide, the massacre, war crimes, however you want to describe it. And I send a message to the world. It's a new day in America. We're going to put a smile on the face of Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer and Rabbi Heschel and Edward Said. It's a new day. We're looking at the world through the lens of poor and working people, not through the lens of the stock market and the 1%.
Okay, it's so interesting that you said that because I was listening as I was driving to come interview you.
Uh,
I was listening to this podcast and they were just talking about how great it was that that the folks who were the top one of the 1%, the billionaires, that they were making so much money and that they would soon be trillionaires, and they were glorifying these people and deifying them. And I said, man, they've got it really completely backwards. It's okay to be wealthy. It's okay to make a way for yourself, but to have all of that money and do nothing with it to help people, then why are you doing it? And why are you glorifying these people and idolizing these people? It just seems like it's backwards to me.
well, I would say not just backwards, brother. It is spiritually obscene and
Yes,
morally bankrupt. And
that's
you
true.
know, and I know, if you and I have $1 trillion and we can't treat our neighbor in a decent way, what we learned in Louisiana is what? We're living lives of idolatry. And I
You're right.
believe that truth.
My dad used to say, my dad wanted to take care of everyone. He's passed now. So my stepdad, he used to say he wouldn't let people, even when I became an adult, like if you had a couple of drinks at the house, he wouldn't let you drive home. He wouldn't let people go home late at night. He would say you can sleep on the floor and cover with the door. That's what he used to say. But he was from a little town near New Orleans called Gramercy or Butcher, and he would say, "Sleep on the floor and cover with the dough,"
Cover with the
and that was
dough.
it.
Oh, but
And
there's love in
that's
his
what that's
formulation. There's
that's
deep
we
care
how
and
we need to
concern.
treat. That's how we need to treat our fellow man in
That's
America.
right.
We can
There's care and
sleep on the
concern
floor and
in
cover
that
with the door.
formulation. That's the best of Louisiana, brother.
I got to tell you, your first 100 days, you're trying to accomplish a lot. I don't know if you'd be able to do that, but more power to you.
Well, we gonna go down swinging. New Orleans is in Louisiana, brother. Don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. You know that. We gonna go down swinging now, brother. Ain't no doubt about that.
Dr. West, please come back. I love speaking to you. Thank you, and best of luck to you, okay?
But it's always a blessing, my brother. Indeed. Salute you now. God bless your loved ones, man. Definitely.
Thank you. Good seeing you. Take care. Thanks for watching The Don Lemon Show. Make sure you click on the image in the top right to subscribe to my channel and the thumbnail in the bottom right to watch more content from my show. And I'll see you next time.